Every night, Adobe knelt on the cold bathroom floor, a pumice stone in one hand and her tears cascading onto the tiles. Her trembling hands dragged the rough stone across her forearm over and over again. In her mind, she replayed the voices that haunted her. You'll never be as pretty as your sisters. Blackie, charcoal, burnt offer. Even the night isn't as dark as you, Adobe. Adaobi was born in a crowded hospital on a rainy August night in Lagos. Her mother, Ngozi, had prayed for another daughter, one who would inherit her light skin and delicate features. Instead, she held a baby with skin as dark as night. Why is she so dark? Ngozi whispered to her husband, Ekene, as she cradled the newborn. Her voice was tinged with disappointment. Ekene, ever the pragmatist, shrugged. She's healthy, that's what matters, he said, but his tone lacked warmth. Ngozi nodded, but deep down, she couldn't hide her dissatisfaction. The baby didn't fit the picture she had in her mind. Adaobi's early years were a constant reminder of how different she was from her siblings. Namdi, the eldest, had inherited their father's caramel complexion and was often called Golden Boy by their mother. From the start, Adaobi felt like an outsider in her own family. While her siblings were dressed in bright, colorful clothes, her mother insisted on dressing her in dull, muted tones. Bright colors don't suit her, Ngozi would say. They make her look even darker. At family gatherings, the comparisons were relentless. Aunties would fawn over her siblings, pinching their cheeks and calling them beautiful children. But when they turned to Adaobi, their expressions would shift. She's unique, one relative once said, her tone betraying her distaste. Ngozi laughed nervously. Yes, she's a little darker, but what can we do? She's still one of us. Adaobi stood silently in the corner, pretending not to hear. But the words cut deep, leaving wounds she would carry for years. School was no escape for Adaobi. In fact, it was worse. Her classmates found endless ways to torment her. The playground was a battlefield where she was the constant target. Blackie, they shouted as she walked by. Charcoal, burnt offering. The boys were the cruelest. They would mimic her walk, pretending to stumble in the darkness she supposedly brought with her. Even the teachers seemed to favor the lighter-skinned students, praising them for their looks and confidence while ignoring Adaobi's contributions. One day, during recess, a group of girls cornered her near the swings. Amaka, the ringleader, smirked as she held up a compact mirror. Look at yourself, Amaka said, shoving the mirror in Adaobi's face. You look like a shadow. Adaobi didn't fight back. She never did. Instead, she ran to the bathroom, locked herself in a stall, and cried. The tears came freely, but they didn't wash away the pain. In her mind, she began to believe that the world would never see her for anything more than her skin. One evening, after an especially brutal day at school, Adaobi locked herself in the bathroom. Her siblings had laughed at her during dinner, and her mother had scolded her for not looking presentable. She stared at the pumice stone on the sink, the one her mother used to clean the tiles. Desperate, Adaobi picked it up and pressed it against her arm. She scraped slowly at first, then harder, ignoring the sting. When she saw a layer of dead skin peel away, she felt a strange sense of satisfaction. Maybe, she whispered to herself, if I do this enough, I'll become lighter. That night, Adaobi began the ritual that would define her teenage years. By the time Adalbi turned 16, she had found a new obsession: social media. Instagram was filled with influencers who seemed to have it all: beauty, confidence, and acceptance. Many of them promoted skin lightening creams, showing off stunning before and after photos. "Say goodbye to dark skin," one caption read. "Be radiant, be admired." Adalbi stared at the photos for hours, mesmerized. These women had once looked like her, but now they were glowing, beautiful, and happy. She began to believe that the solution to all her problems lay in those jars of cream. Adalbi didn't have money to spare, so she began saving every naira she could. She skipped lunches at school, walked instead of taking public transport, and even sold her old clothes. Every coin she saved brought her closer to her dream. Her mother noticed the change. "Why are you suddenly so frugal?" Ngozi asked one evening, eyeing her suspiciously. "I'm just being responsible," Adalbi lied, avoiding her mother's gaze. After weeks of sacrifice, Adalbi finally had enough to buy her first skin lightening cream. The vendor's kiosk was tucked into a crowded market, surrounded by stalls selling everything from fabrics to electronics. The woman behind the counter had unnaturally pale skin and a polished, confident demeanor. "You've come to the right place," the vendor said, smiling as Adalbi approached. "This cream will change your life." Adalbi hesitated, clutching the money in her hand. "Will it work?" she asked nervously. "My dear, it's magic," the vendor replied. "In 2 weeks, you'll be lighter than the Lagos sun." Adalbi handed over her savings and left the market clutching the small jar like it was a treasure. That night, Adalbi locked herself in the bathroom and applied the cream. It stung, but she told herself it was worth it. She repeated the process every night, ignoring the burning sensation and the redness that followed. Adalbi's transformation was undeniable. Within a month of using the cream, her once ebony skin had faded to a glowing light caramel tone. The change was dramatic enough to silence her classmates, who now stared at her with a mix of awe and envy. Even Amaka, the queen bee of her class and Adalbi's biggest tormentor, began to take notice. During a lunch break, Amaka approached her. "Adalbi, I didn't realize you were this fine. What cream are you using?" she asked, her voice dripping with curiosity. Adalbi hesitated, torn between pride and secrecy. She eventually muttered, "Just some skincare routine I started." Amaka nodded approvingly. "Well, it's working. Maybe you should sit with us today." That moment marked the beginning of Adalbi's new life. The girls who had once laughed at her now wanted to be her friends. The boys who had teased her now complimented her. It was everything she had ever wanted, or so she thought. At home, the changes were even more noticeable. Adalbi's mother, Ngozi, began treating her differently. Where once there had been criticism, there was now pride. "You're finally looking like a proper young woman," Ngozi said one evening, admiring her daughter's new complexion. "See, I always told you that taking care of yourself would make all the difference." Adalbi's siblings, too, began to change their tone. Namdi, who had mocked her relentlessly as a child, now asked her for advice on his social media photos. Ifeoma, her beautiful and confident sister, began borrowing her clothes, saying, "You have good taste, Adalbi." For the first time in her life, Adalbi felt like she belonged. But beneath the surface, she couldn't shake the feeling that her newfound acceptance was conditional. Would they still love me if they knew the truth? She wondered. With her lighter skin came a wave of romantic attention that Adaobi had never experienced before. At a school party, a boy named Chijioke, who was known for his good looks and charm, approached her. "You're looking stunning tonight, Adaobi," he said, flashing a smile. "I don't know why I never noticed you before." Adaobi blushed, her heart racing. For years, she had watched girls like Amaka bask in the admiration of boys like Chijioke. Now, it was her turn. The feeling was intoxicating, and she couldn't get enough of it. Soon, suitors began to line up. Even older men, wealthy businessmen, started noticing her. One, in particular, stood out, a man named Chief Obina. He was in his late 30s, successful, and unapologetically bold. "You're the most beautiful woman I've seen in years," Chief Obina said during a chance meeting at a friend's wedding. He showered her with compliments and gifts, leaving Adaobi feeling like she was living a dream. But the dream came with a price. As Adaobi continued using the cream, she began to notice subtle changes in her skin. The burning sensation that had initially been mild grew worse with each application. Small dark patches began to appear on her arms and legs, but she ignored them, convincing herself that beauty always came with sacrifices. Her nightly rituals became more intense. She added harsher scrubs and soaps to her routine, desperate to maintain her complexion. The mirror became both her best friend and her worst enemy, a place where she sought validation but also faced the growing evidence of her body's decline. One morning, Adaobi woke up to find her arms covered in painful blisters. The once smooth, glowing skin she had worked so hard to achieve was now marred by red, inflamed patches. Panic set in as she tried to cover the blemishes with long sleeves and makeup. At school, Amaka noticed. "Adaobi, are you okay? Your skin looks different," she said, her voice laced with concern. "I'm fine," Adaobi lied, quickly changing the subject. But the truth was far from fine. Over the next few weeks, the blister spread and her skin began to peel. The creams that had once been her salvation were now her curse. Desperate for answers, Adaobi returned to the vendor who had sold her the creams. The woman barely looked up as Adaobi approached. "Your products are ruining my skin," Adaobi shouted, showing the blisters on her arms. The vendor shrugged. "These things happen. Maybe you used too much. Just stop for a few days and you'll be fine." "But you wanted to be light, didn't you? Now you are. What more do you want?" the vendor snapped, her tone dismissive. Adaobi left the kiosk feeling helpless and betrayed. For the first time, she realized she was alone in her struggle. After weeks of hiding her condition, Adaobi finally confided in her mother. Ngosi's initial reaction was anger. "What did you do to yourself, Adaobi?" she shouted, her eyes filled with disbelief. "I just wanted to be like everyone else," Adaobi whispered, her voice trembling. Ngozi softened, her guilt evident. "We need to see a doctor." The visit to the dermatologist was a turning point. The doctor examined Adaobi's skin, his expression growing graver with each passing moment. "Adaobi," he said gently, "the chemicals in the creams have caused severe damage to your skin. The burns and blisters are symptoms of a deeper issue. I'm afraid you've developed skin cancer." The room fell silent. Adaobi's heart raced as the weight of his words sank in. Cancer. The very thing she had feared but never dared to acknowledge. How bad is it?" she managed to ask. The doctor sighed. "It's advanced. The damage to your tissues is extensive and the cancer has begun to spread. Treatment options are limited." Adalbi's diagnosis sent shockwaves through her family. Her mother wept openly, blaming herself for years of criticism that had pushed Adalbi to this point. "I should have told you how beautiful you were," Ngozi sobbed, holding her daughter's hand. "I should have protected you." Her siblings, who had once mocked her, now apologized profusely. Namdi, the eldest, knelt by her hospital bed, tears streaming down his face. "I'm sorry, Adalbi. I didn't know my words could hurt you this much." But Adalbi couldn't find it in herself to comfort them. The pain she felt, both physical and emotional, was too overwhelming. As Adalbi's condition worsened, she spent most of her days in the hospital. The once vibrant and confident girl she had become was now a shadow of herself. Her skin, once admired by many, was now fragile and scarred. In the quiet moments, Adalbi reflected on her life. She thought about the nights spent scraping her skin, the taunts from her classmates, and the fleeting validation she had gained from her transformation. None of it had been worth the price she was now paying. With the help of a kind nurse, Adalbi recorded a video from her hospital bed. In it, she shared her story, her struggles, her mistakes, and her message to others. "To anyone out there who feels like they're not enough," she began, her voice weak but steady, "please listen to me. You are beautiful just the way you are. Don't let anyone make you feel otherwise. I thought I needed to change myself to be accepted, but all I did was destroy what made me unique. Please, don't make the same mistake I did." The video went viral, sparking conversations about colorism, self-love, and the dangers of skin bleaching. People from all over the world reached out, sharing their own stories of insecurity and self-discovery. When Adalbi passed away, her family was devastated. They mourned not just the loss of their daughter and sister, but the role they had played in her pain. Ngozi, determined to honor Adalbi's memory, started a foundation dedicated to educating young women about the dangers of skin bleaching and the importance of self-acceptance. Adalbi's story became a beacon of hope for others. Her video continued to inspire conversations, challenging societal standards of beauty and encouraging people to embrace their uniqueness. In the end, Adalbi's life was a painful reminder of the cost of rejection and the power of self-love. Her legacy lived on, not in the fairness of her skin, but in the strength of her voice.
Hey guys, if you got to this point of this video, comment where you are watching from. Give this video a thumbs up and subscribe for more amazing stories.